Starting Hangout is live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Comic Cracks channel. Today, an extra special guest, Mr. Dan Fogel of Fogel's Underground Price and Grading Guide there. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me here, dude. Much appreciated.
Thanks very much for getting in
Comic
touch.
Crack.
What's
No
that?
problem.
Sorry?
No problem. The Crypt of Comic Crack.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. As you broadcast from your dank, cold basement, it's perfect.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
In the heart of Cleveland.
Yeah. So maybe we'll just jump right into it then with the first question. How does it feel to be a stooge of the man and of corporate America?
Wow, is that an actual question?
No, it's not. It's just no.
Well, I wish I was. I'd be a lot richer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If I was a proper stooge, I'd be richer. But yeah, no.
Yeah.
There's there's the business, and then there's the art form, and occasionally they meet.
Yeah.
One of the places they meet is my price guide. But
well, and that's
me likey capitalism.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I bring it up, because that's something we were sort of joking around about in our first conversation, because some of the things that were written on Castle Red Skull and that sort of idea. So maybe that's as good a place as any to start. I mean, that's got to be the hardest part about the whole thing, kind of meeting those two worlds. You have, because you're a huge fan of undergrounds, you've done undergrounds, you've helped published, you represent artists, all sorts of things, and then having to make your way, putting that into kind of a price guide. And again, this isn't the first one that's existed. Putting it together, was that something that was difficult at first? What kind of started the very first price guide?
Well, the late great Jay Kennedy, he basically wanted to put together a checklist. There had been a couple of lists done prior in the 70s. Big time collector. He put together a list, and then there was an illustrated index that came out about 79, I think, and that was by the great collector and dealer, also late and great Jerry Wiest. So around 1982, you want to do a checklist, but Jerry and some of the other people involved said, well, make it a price guide, then more people would buy it. So he added that function to it. Lasted till about 2000. Jay never did a second follow-up volume, but when Jerry Wiest did his comic art guide, the second edition in 2000, he added 18 pages of comics and fanzine prices. First guide came along in 2006 with a supplement in 2010, and then the new guide came out about a year ago in 2015 spring. So what's out there? Why is it cool? Why is it collectible? What actually exists? And then, God help us, the financial part of it, but that helps drive the interest. If people are collecting stuff, most of them are reading it. So, they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. And was that something that you found coming up a lot? Like, people was there any talk with people through the years of, I mean, I kind of relate the story when I was talking about this specifically, just as the place where I bought the book from, Book Fair here in Winnipeg, they said they had a box kind of in the back room for years, and they just didn't really know what to do with it because they didn't know how to price things. So they kind of held on to things because, the little bit that they did know, maybe about like the bigger names, Robert Crumb, etc., they kind of wanted to get a fair shake on their product. Was that something that you were finding, that people just weren't sure how to price these? Or
yeah, I mean, that was the early 2000s. I mean, that was the beginning of eBay and the growth of the market and collectors, networking and stuff, and all kinds of user groups and forums, and people were starting to come together. And I was a contributor to Comic Book Marketplace magazine, and I had announced I was going to be doing underground comics price guide around 2002 was when I first balloons about it, and some of the main collectors reached out to me and put me in touch with other ones, guys who were active posting in forums and wikis and things like that. So it's easy to grow from there. But
Yeah.
but the problem is, I mean, prices were all over the place. They were pretty wide. Heritage in the early days, they were using, the Kennedy old prices, but whatever had also been updated in Jerry Wiest. And then, actually, right around the same time Jerry Wiest passed away in 2011, Heritage published a third edition of his art guide, though it didn't have any of the undergrounds listed in it. So I'm the only person to do three and counting, who's still alive.
Yeah.
As far as undergrounds go. So I don't know. It puts a target on my back.
Yeah. And is the plan now to do one every year? I know that this was a huge undertaking and it was kind of delayed throughout its making. Is that the hope that you want to try to do one each year now?
No. I mean, probably every other year, and they're going to be multiple volumes. There's 2 volumes this time. It just grew too large and was too crazy, especially for shipping around the world.
Yeah.
So we split it into 2 volumes. The current volume is the main underground comics listings. It's about twice as big as the 2006 guide. And then volume 2 we're working on. It's going to be out sometime next year. We'll figure out exactly when as we go along. And that'll have updated mini comics and updated British section expanded more into a. Then I'll add classic rock posters, Tijuana Bibles, specific fanzines, and newspaper tabloids to the mix as well. But so probably the next main underground guide, and that's going to be, 2-3 years, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Constantly doing a volume in addition to our other projects.
Well, and I guess that's the big thing, right? Like the size of it growing, because you were mentioning before that you just keep getting turned on to stuff as you keep going. There's people sending you messages about, have you heard of this book? Have you heard of that book? And you're just kind of always uncovering things. So, I mean, that's just going to be an enormous undertaking. And I can imagine that once you start including like mini comics and things like that, that's probably even a bigger world, right? Is that because a lot of those in my mind is more like self-published as far as even photocopied works that people are handing out? Are you going, like, you want to obviously get as in-depth as possible, I imagine, right?
Well, there's I mean, the supplement mini comics section was about 1,500 titles.
Okay.
And I'll be adding more to that, obviously. And that's even more potentially infinite underground section. And virtually every section can grow, forever. So editors, I mean, what's most important in the marketplace, what's being reported as selling most frequently, what has the most important creators. And when people reach out to me, whether they buy an ad or not, they provide me with cover scans and the publishing info I need. So that's another part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got more than enough. It's just a matter of figuring out how much room we have and then targeting the ones most important to update and expand. But there's always got to be a cutoff, especially in time, because you could go on forever and ever. And that's why we kind of said, well, this current guide's way too big. Let's split it in half.
Uh-huh. And if it ever comes down to it, would you do, something where you're splitting by kind of eras, or decades rather, like say 70s to 90s or that sort of thing?
Possibly, if it gets so huge at some point to split the older stuff off, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I like seeing it all mixed in together, off into the different categories. That helps keep them manageable, more manageable anyway, to a certain extent.
Yeah. So when you first got in touch with me, one of the things was that you saw the video where I was talking about it. Was there anything specifically that you wanted to address about that video that you wanted to talk about? I know that one of the things you said when we talked was that I glossed over the acknowledgements page. And I think that's something that you're absolutely right. It's really important to point out, like, you have collaborators, I'm assuming, or people contributing rather, all over the world, I suppose, right, with information.
Yeah, and some of them for, like I said, almost 15 years.
Yeah.
And so it's not, I mean, this is 3 or 4 dozenth publication I've done, since the early 90s. It's my 3rd price guide. It's an ongoing thing. We did kind of reinvent the wheel here, but part of the process is there are a lot of information streams, both digital and hard copy. I'm always updating my personal files. There's always old information popping in. You know, and the new stuff popping up that's just, you know, noteworthy or cool, you know, the latest reprint of a Crumb thing or this or that.
Yeah.
But a lot of my, you know, were advisors are publishers and artists themselves, and they're obviously more than helpful in getting me the info. And I like to spotlight them and share why things are cool. Again, I love the art form, I love the artists, I love comics, and I love these comics. And there's no one else pointing them out or bringing them into the right perspective. Some people don't think a price guide or grading is the right perspective, but yeah, we have to. There's niches and niches and niches, and this is a niche of a niche. And just by its very nature, part of it's exclude and freak out a lot of people, and that's why it's been so marginalized from the beginning into this day. A lot of the comic stores don't carry adult books, so it's always an uphill battle. Though really, you know, Google's a wonderful thing, and using it properly, there's always people discovering me. But you know, I have had the guides. My guide's been around in some form almost 10 years now at this point. So really, really dedicated people have found me and then open up, you know, out of the blue. So that's kind of fun. You know, old people, newer people, everyone brings something to the, you know, to the party, as it were.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I mean, that's even something I've experienced here doing videos on YouTube. I mean, it's some of the people who I'm friends with now that don't really know much about these comics. Not like I'm any sort of expert on them by any stretch, but I mean, it's great for these still to be around and findable and to expose new people to, you know, that's one of the beauties of it, right? What else can be done with comics besides your Marvel and your superhero stuff, right? Showing some art, you know, so maybe that's something.
Well, here, I'm going to grab I'm going to grab a guide here.
Okay.
Flip through. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's part of the economic model. I mean, no one's getting rich here. And, you know, the money that's coming into me and my partner has been dribbling in, you know, so it's like we're not, no one's bribed me yet. You know, I've said from the beginning, hey, bribe me. No one's bribed me. So I can say, you know, the people who do advertise, that's part of, you know, that's part of what a price guide is. You know, you open it up, you find people, it's fun meeting them face to face. You know, speaking as, you know, a price guide fanboy from the old days, you know, since I was a kid reading Overstreet. And I've been since before I could read, and I've been collecting them for not long after that, and going to conventions, and started being a convention dealer in grade school, and then started being a comic book dealer in grade school and a high school convention dealer. So I went around the country, you know, met Overstreet. When I started doing San Diego Comic-Con, this will be like my 32nd year in a row this year. In fact, I took over Overstreet's old table at the old convention center in San Diego, and became an Overstreet advisor back in '87 when he was doing more than just the annual. There were various updates and things like that, and we tried to get him to add undergrounds. It was something he wasn't interested in doing. And then when Steve Geppe's Gemstone bought it, you know, he wasn't interested in doing it either, which created the opportunity for me. But mainstream comic book market, have been so since I was a kid. You know, I've slung my share of Superman 1s and Marvel 1s, and, you know, I've probably sold more mainstream comics and undergrounds in the past almost 40 years. So I know how important it is to get, you know, the higher profile collectors and dealers handling undergrounds, and Heritage has been great for that, with their auctions and things like that. But, you know, the way things are turning out, I mean, you love the comics, you love the stories, you love the art, That's one thing. Slabbing a physical item is a completely different thing. Play the two. You know, it's it took a few years for me to figure out what CGC was all about. They were the first major slabbers of comics, of undergrounds, and but just being able to study GP analysis, has a great website and app where it tracks slab sales going back years, and it's updated daily, so you can spot trends. They have the pie charts and graphs, so you can see the different grades of the different books, as well for my own slab prices. But I think it was new money, and it is new money, and it's different money. There'll always be the hardcore collector, of which there aren't that many for undergrounds, believe it or not, less than 2,000 easily, that I would say these days. But people have, because of the weird publishing history and the multiple reprints, there wasn't enough investor and collector confidence. And with my guide and slab auctions, both eBay and Heritage and others, that just made it more widely available and let people feel more comfortable about dipping their toe in the water. And yeah, it's nice to have a slab, but they'll go out and they'll buy a trade or they'll buy a cheaper reprint. So I think it brings new money in, and yeah, some people overpay for stuff, but that's the same in any economy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But long enough, and we have been at it to study the effects of eBay and everything long enough, and to track eBay sales for a decade and a half. So I think that's enough time for reasoned analysis. But I mean, it doesn't take away if someone's slabbing a first printing Zap 1 Plymel. That's just smart, if it's above a certain grade. So believe me, there is no conspiracy here, other than people who love comics and who want my information to be as accurate as possible.
Yeah. Well, and I think, just to kind of further on that point, I mean, I think that was, well, not I think, I mean, I know that that's for sure something that was on our minds, those of us who were kind of like, CGC and undergrounds, it just seems to just go against everything that on discovering undergrounds early in our reading, comic book reading life. It just seems to really go against everything. I mean, there's nothing better than not treating him like a precious item to some degree. I mean, reading them and seeing that history of the people that have handled them and passing them around with their friends and that sort of thing. I mean, it's something I did in school with the undergrounds that I had, passing them around the room to other kids in junior high and high school and stuff. So I think it's that initial reaction of, who the fuck is slabbing these comic books? It seems completely the wrong thing to be doing with this specifically. That's meant for, like you were saying, like the Superman ones and the action ones and Spider-Mans and that whole market. So I think it's a little bit of growing pains as far as why the hell would you should be reading these and taking this as part of your life, as opposed to putting it in a case and putting it on a pedestal to some degree. But
we have a responsibility to the dealers and the collectors and the fans, a wide view of what's happening. I mean, specifically in the market, and what tools you can use to make sure you're not ripped off, or you're at least informed when you're buying and when you're selling.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be used, in conjunction with the Overstreet grading guide.
Mm-hmm.
We adapted that text. We've been doing it since 2005. And we've had the description shared of the 10-point system, which has been standard since 2000. CGC uses the same 10-point system, though they don't release their grading standards officially like Overstreet and I do.
Okay.
But my guys, I mean, we adapted it more to what undergrounds are, and they weren't necessarily, like you said, with white pages or this or that, but it gets really obscure telling the printings across, sometimes, and sometimes we reorder it even between guides based on new scholarship. But it's on a detail, it was a balancing act. We couldn't afford to have every page in color. It would have been nice to have color pages for the grades, and, didn't have them bigger and with more detail and maybe down the line, but It's meant for you just to get a basic idea, and then you want more detail, buy Overstreet's grading guide.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that has all the blowouts and the columns, and will show you, you know, what a crease or foxing or, you know, visualized thing. This isn't meant to take sales away from that. It's meant to amplify sales across the board. And I wouldn't want to recreate that, you know, nor should I.
Yeah.
You know, serious collectors and dealers, it's easy enough to buy a copy from the publisher or go on eBay or Amazon or whatever to find one. You know, I would also say, you know, get Kennedy's guide, get my old guides for the articles. You know, has stuff listed in a much more detail and an index and stuff than I'm ever going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And recreate. I didn't, when we did our original database, it was first Don Donahue, the original publisher of Zap Comics, and a lot of early stuff. He had his catalog, his famous Apex Novelties catalog,
Mm-hmm.
in FileMaker 4. And it took me a few years, you know, FileMaker 5, you couldn't import it. We eventually, with the help of Jay Farrell, I turned it into Excel, and, you know, there's a lot of boring data stuff involved with FileMaker and InDesign and all that over the years.
Yeah.
That was the crux of it. And then big collector, Dr. Scheinman's personal collection. It's easy enough to fuse in spreadsheets and databases and stuff, and that kind of became my spine. And then it's easy enough, you know, I work in Excel, so you know, I can track eBay sales people do for me. So, you know, there's a lot of thought that goes into each and every listing. You know, I had to rewrite the 06 guide completely up to these new standards, and, you know, that's one of the reasons it took longer, but everything was audited 2015 prices as opposed to 2006 prices, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, so there's only two price guides in print now, Overstreet and me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the only two that are verifiable, that have stood the test of time, that the major dealers use and refer to. You know, and that's a serious responsibility, and part of the reality of that is slabbing. You know, so that's why I had there. You know, can we make it better next time? Absolutely. We'll detail, probably not to that level, that we might do something more, you know, down the line. But if enough people got to buy this one first, you know, we're about halfway sold out. Want to sell out the rest of them, you know. So
how many did you print up?
There were you know, over, you know, 2,000 plus little overrun of the soft cover, and then 100 signed and numbered, and about 50 artist proofs of the hardcover. And this is the first time we did a hardcover. People have been after us to do that for a while. This makes the damn thing even heavier.
Yeah.
It's half a pound heavier, I think. Another reason not to have a hardcover 500 pager. You know, this one's 336 pages, but that's enough, you know.
Yeah.
But it wasn't meant to replace. There's fantastic, comprehensive, you know, comics histories and books out there, like Rebel Visions by Patrick Rosenkrantz. So I didn't really, you know, some stuff's in depth, some stuff is more of a gloss over, but there's always new people to underground comics picking it up, you know. So it's a fine line mix, and the articles are what you end up with. People offer, people recommend. I think, well, this might be good. You know, it ties into another project I'm doing. You know, so, you know, I don't feel Rosenkrantz on the pure history. I just want to point people in his direction. You know, so I'll try and have a more balanced view, you know, maybe more balanced articles next time around, but dig one kind, they don't dig the other. You know, it's something not for everyone. And
true. Well, and I guess, you know, that's an obvious thing. You're not going to please everybody. The one thing that, because I agree, I mean, you do have to, and again, it's just the part of that trying to find your footing within kind of the real world, as opposed to kind of just the fanboy world, right? One of the things I did wonder about was a marketplace type of articles and things like that. Is that something that is easy to come by? Is that something that's it's literally just guys in town or distributors or people who own comic shops in certain cities that are just giving you rough data on how the sales have been going? Because like you were saying, there's not a lot of people. You can't really go every place and find underground comics and back issues and things like that. So how do you kind of compile that data? Is it mostly just eBay or firsthand stories?
Well, as I had a couple market reports in the supplement and just one here. I'd love to get in more, but that's a whole nother huge thing. I think we'll have it a lot more comprehensive and wide ranging for the next big guide. A lot of the big guys, they write big market reports for over 3.2 and they get burned out. So,
Yeah.
a lot of people aren't comfortable writing. So, and the market wasn't so great that I felt like writing up a depressing, there's been a lot of stuff hitting the market the last few years.
Yeah.
A lot of keys out there, a lot of prices plummeting. I didn't think it was anyone's best interest to be trumpeting that, rather get this new one out. And then, there's still far fewer collectors than there are books out there. And there's still one of the things, there are piles of books out there. There's a handful, less than a handful probably, of true 10.0s, but I've seen them. Mm-hmm. The Snatch came right from Donahue's file cabinet, and there are piles of old, like I said, I've graded multiple undergrounds up to 40 of the same book from collections of artists and old stock from, old head shops that closed or record shops or whatever, or just comic dealers. I mean, so there are out there. There's still discovered or dug up or that are still in cases. The speculator market's been going on, since around Conan 1 in 1970, really, in earnest. So, and it is, and like I told you in our private conversation the other day, really, I've noticed there's no bump except in grades above 9.2. I started out listing 9.4 prices in 06 and then changed it to 9.2 to be more in line with Overstreet. And it's easy enough to do the math in your head, for the other grades, 2.0 good, fine 6.0. And really, when you grade, that's kind of linear. It's better than good to find when you're doing a huge pile of books, you sort them out and then you subsort them.
Yeah.
And then 9.2. And then I do see bumps on some books above my, top listing in, say, 9.4, 9.6, especially 9.8, 10s. But yeah, they are out there in the wild. There are beautiful copies popping up of all kinds of books. Mm-hmm. Undergrounds have been around for, officially, 20, 30 years less than mainstream comics. So there's fewer of them in some ways. But the print runs were freaking huge in the 70s. So there's tons of books out there. There's so many common things that are, gathering dust out there. So, what makes a $10 book in California, a $20 book in Canada versus 30 in New York, it is all regional. People give me their private sales and around the country too. And I bear that in mind when I'm updating listings and things like that. But I'll go back and I'll look at the last few years of emails and stuff, whenever I do a new guide. And that way I kind of keep up to date. And I lower prices where necessary too. 10 high-grade copies of this one came out and lowered. All right, it's lower a bit. I lowered the fine prices across the board because, there's just so much mid-grade stuff out there. It makes sense, and, so a good guide evolves. It lowers prices. It raises them. It responds to what's going on.
Yeah, what's happening in the world. Yeah,
I wish it was conspiracy,
Yeah.
But definitely, a big shout out to my partner, Mark Fox, and comicsjoint.com. And he also handles hippiecomics.com for us, tweaked and updated soon. And he designed the whole book, is the great color section with those murals and stuff of the artists.
Love that. Yeah, I love that
the articles.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a first-rate talent, and I'm damn lucky to have him for a partner.
Yeah. And how long have
with an X joint?
Yeah, that's right. Comics Joint. I'll make sure I keep putting links down. How long have you known him for?
At least 2007, I think 2008. And then he started, contributing and helping out with the supplement. And then we've been really working together since then. my partner, and all the Crumb reprints and other things that we've done since then. But he's a first-rate, scholar on his own. So,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like and Comics Joint is the #1 underground, on the web when people look to do research, and you always see people link into it for articles. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
a cool
just
thing. I'm
fantastic.
lucky to have them.
Yeah, yeah. We have a few people watching. Just let me check to see if there's any. Yeah, nothing. Just a point brought up that just the undergrounds or adult comics have just kind of been replaced with more the genteel species alternative comics, which I guess is the thing, especially with the folding of head shops and things. And it kind of brings back to this point of the 10.0, because that's one thing I really scoffed at. But it's something that also didn't occur to me, that there was, like you're saying, there was literally boxes uncovered that had not been opened since they came off the printing press, put into a box and shipped to these head shops. The head shops either went out of business and the boxes just remained still sealed. Is that the case then? Sorry, can you hear me? Are you all right there?
Back in there.
Oh, I was just saying that it's something that didn't occur to me about the 10.0s, that literally you're uncovering boxes of some of these undergrounds that are still sealed, that have made it to the head shops. The head shops went out of business. The boxes of comics still stayed in these people's basements, and you're starting to uncover those, which they basically are right off the printing press, right into a box, and still in kind of pristine shape. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done stacks of, say, Herald Head #2, 38 copies of those, 40 copies of Air Pirates 1. But you do see the difference, and you do get minute between a 9.6 or a 9.4.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's something you don't expect. But the longer you're in the business and you travel around and you meet people, the more stuff pops up. I mean, I'm a healer, it happens since I was a kid. So, since the era. And, so I've got my own knowledge for that. And a lot of old timers help plug me into what's been going on since the beginning. So there's kind of a long view there of watching the market. And yeah, shifting over to comic shops and the direct market, evolving, out of the underground market distribution system. Yeah, stuff that was, it started with Star Reach in the 70s, stuff ground level,
Mm-hmm.
they might sew a nipple, up to some overt, and that kind of become more acceptable with the indie alternative, label. And yeah, I mean, that's ultimately labels, is, what you want to call something is,
Yeah.
Are Boom or IDE or Image even really indies when they're among the top 10 publishers and they're doing licensed books,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's all effective. And ultimately, I have to decide whether I'm going to list a book. I mean, I really think there's like maybe 500 books that are co-listed by me and Overstreet, and I just kind of amplify their listings there. We, the fine price for $1 or $2. But, so, there's stuff that I don't list that they list, and vice versa. So I just kind of want to be a supplement and support system to that as well.
Yeah.
What's most important on the market, and what are people buying and selling and interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So
then,
yeah.
no, sorry, go on. Sorry.
People confidence, like we said, the dealers out there, the collectors, and and hopefully their readers as well.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of, if you don't see them out there or being treated like other comics, people just don't have access to them, and there are younger people getting turned on to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important to have newer reprints and editions out there in the bookstores and comic stores.
Mm-hmm.
With higher price points that are, cost effective in the marketplace,
Yeah. Is there anything else as far as the book that you wanted to focus on? I think we covered like the articles and the grading. Those were the biggest things, I think, in my video, basically.
Yeah. Well, I I had the guys who worked on Overstreet's past and present grading guide, Dr. Arnold T. Blumberg and Mark Huseman, and with the permission of Jeppy Overstreet and J.C. Vaughn, the editor there, and we were able to adapt it and tie into it. Dr. Blumberg, he talks about a lot what the differences are between undergrounds and mainstream, the multiple printings, how can you tell this or that, paper quality, all that kind of thing. And I'll go into that more in volume 2, which I'll talk about more in a minute, more specific to grading mini comics or tabloids or this or that. And then my field guide, there's a lot of specific tips I go into and how to grade and appraise your books. It's hard to be realistic, but set benchmarks and objective guidelines like a grading guide, then you can kind of help you step into the real world and be realistic about whether you're rich or you can make a killing doing this or that.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's probably got to be part of the most difficult thing with grading these books specifically. When you're dealing with kind of grading older Marvel, DC, bigger companies and things, you kind of have a across the board kind of starting point. But with undergrounds, I'm assuming, depending on the amount of printings, depending on where they were printing, your kind of baseline is different from publication to publication, I'm assuming, right? Like not only with things like the paper quality and et cetera, but just where it was printed, what kind of press it was printed on, what kind of room it was printed in, basically, if it's more of like a factory setting or if it's literally some guy's living room, that sort of thing. So
right, some guy in an attic with a handheld press, drinking brandy, playing around with color plates.
Yeah.
Like Don Donahue. And a lot of the early undergrounds, early printings of the main undergrounds were hand assembled, so they are rough. There'll be weird trims, there'll be this or that. The Bijou Bunnies #1, another major underground, is larger than the interior, and the interior is on white paper.
Okay.
And then later on, so there's all these little tricks, and it's important to know these things and say, well, it was printed on tan paper, or it's never going to be as perfect. A 68 to come off the handheld press, as perfectly as a 68 Marvel or DC.
Yeah.
Make allowances for that,
Mm-hmm. When I was listening to, I think it was on the podcast that you sent me the link for, you touched a little bit on kind of moving into the digital world. How has that been coming as far as like, are you scanning books yourself? You have people that are scanning books to help you include some of these with like, the CLZs and that sort of thing, or not CLZs, the whatever the whole digital realm is for comics.
Well, as far as doing a digital version of the guide on the Heritage in 2007, and it didn't do so well at the time. Maybe part of it was because it was only for PCs and not Mac.
Mm-hmm.
But it's getting a digital version or some sort of really cool hyper digital app. I mean, it's something we're looking into and we'll do down the line when it's more cost effective. But the whole digital world has made this guide possible.
Yeah.
Being able to combine these digital files and out of that, and people sending me info that we bring into the main file. But people scan covers, people send me spreadsheets. So a lot of the work is done in the visual. When I'm working on these listings, I'll have, half a dozen programs up, 12 windows. I'll have 3 file boxes and 2 short boxes open, and I'll be moving back and forth. Oh shit! What year was this 75-cent printing? Was it 74? Was it 76? Oh well, here's an ad in Bud Plant from 74 at 75, but the photo is of a sticker.
Oh, okay.
Cover, so
yeah.
That's the kind of level of anal specificity that we tried to do when we upgraded the guide. Have one book on every line. I do like that layout. It is like a checklist.
Yeah, for sure.
It does get crazy with some of the titles, but it's kind of fun. I mean, who doesn't love Cerebus or High Times or Heavy Metal?
Yeah.
Well,
and lately because I've been using the book so much, like I'm finding I really like the layout for that section. It's grown on me even more. I find it really easy to follow now. And as I said in the video too, like I love the kind of breakdown of the different printings, because that's something that notoriously I used a site like Comics Joint for to get kind of information on what printings I already had in my collection, that sort of thing. But I love the main section and the photos at the top, or the scans at the top rather, just in line with what's on the page and things. I love it a lot.
Well, a lot of work goes into that, and yeah, we're very consciously emulating the Overstreet model. For
Yeah,
I worked on
which
Overstreet
makes
for
sense.
20 years before I did my first guide, and
Yeah,
people expected it simple. Always
they're already
wanted the
used to it
print.
because they've seen it.
Yeah, always wanted the size of the book and the print to be larger. We went a little overboard till we got our sea legs in terms of the size of the font. And my system now, we can put as much text as we want in there. I was kind of constrained before. But yeah, I like seeing it spread out. It is easier to make notes, make a checklist if you want. Itself is larger. You can lay it flat. It just has to be intuitive. And, I fine-tuned the old guide by using it myself. I mean, I priced God knows how many scores of thousands of books over the years. And of course,
Yeah,
since the underground guide came out, even more. So I'm constantly working and refining it in the field. So if I make a mistake, I'll mark, or whatever, get a typo, I'll mark it up in my master guide and then fix it as we go along. Or people have always been good with the feedback. There's, always been criticism, and constructive or otherwise, since the beginning. I mean, keep finding stuff cheap out there, but this doesn't necessarily undo it. There's always people
no,
overpricing stuff, and there's always stuff popping up, and it's if you're on the hunt, all the old thrills we had are still out there.
totally.
To know, you're not going to buy it, it's a first, or sell
Yeah,
one, vice versa. Having that kind of
yeah,
confidence across the board is what we're going for. And when I think, I like to think we've lived up to it, over the years in moving forward. It's it's an honor to be in people's hands as they go through long boxes, and we want to keep earning that,
yeah,
moving forward.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it was such a great thing to find that short box filled. I can't even tell you. As soon as I walked in the store that day when I first discovered the books there at Book Fair, just unbelievable thrill. Because I mean, like you said, I don't see that anymore. I absolutely don't. If you do, you see a small scattering of a few books here and there, and it's usually the same kind of things. You're seeing like the Freak Brothers, especially, you see all over the place. So it was great to find a short box filled with titles I didn't know what the hell they were. So, anything you wanted to add about the second volume too? Anything else you wanted to add?
Well, we're still nailing down exactly when next year shoot for premiering it. I've been ridiculously optimistic over the years when I think we'll be ready. I'm going to go the other direction now, and under promise and over deliver.
Yeah.
We are quietly, getting the word out there to our, and selling some of the ad spots to the major guys. Just getting that lined up. I've got a lot of the info, just ready to be threaded together. The rock poster part of it is going to be huge, and a huge addition and a lot more work. Comprehensive price guide and grading guide, for the classic rock posters, the Bill Graham presents, and we're sponsored by Wolfgang's Vault, the Bill Graham archives,
Okay.
and the
Yeah.
Family Dog numbered series. The Bill Graham and the Family Dog numbered series are the most collected series of classic rock posters and handbills from, the mid 60s to the early 70s. And that marketplace is even more fractious and contentious than it. There's been an identification guide out for years by Eric King. I've teamed up with him to convert his ID system and numbering system to my price guide system. And then the old grading system that was kind of crowdsourced in the 90s by Jacaber Castor and the Psychedelic Solution Shop in New York, we're adapting to the Overstreet 10-point system.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll get a whole new set of enemies and critics from the poster world over that, but it's important that because the cartoonists cross over. You know, the artist, the Moscoso, the Griffin, the Crumb, to a smaller extent, Shelton. World of the 60s that people are interested in. And we just want to widen it. So that'll be a new section, the Tijuana Bibles, the dirty little smutties that inspired Undergrounds. We'll have a different formatted section for that. We'll be adding tabloids, you know, newspapers, East Village Other, Berkeley Barb, stuff that carried underground strips even before they were collected in books, and a few other regional ones. It's targeted towards, you know, the underground artists and certain titles. Robin Dale, who does a great fanzine guide of his own, is going to be working on that section with me. We'll be updating mini comic section and the international section, like I said.
Yeah.
So that'll be it'll be the same size. We'll limit it to the same size now that we know and how much information, how it fit. That's a good size to keep it. And then recommendations in the future of the different sections. I know it's kind of a weird conglomeration for this one, for volume 2, but you know, so you know, between Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr and all that, you know, people will know. And you know, I'm on Facebook every day and Twitter practically, so
yeah,
a lot of people, you know, come to me directly and get me info there. You know, hey, what about this? What about that? So that's a good way to keep in touch. Messages are one of the folders I have open, you know, one of the windows I have open when I'm doing my research.
Yeah. Or they can get in touch by coming to see you at conventions and things still, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I do a few a year, not as many as I used to, but yeah, in a couple of weeks I'll be at the inaugural Three Rivers Comic-Con, which I'm looking forward to quite a bit. Todd McDevitt of New Dimension Comics, great guy. It's going to be a fantastic show. And then, like I said before, July, I'll be doing my 31st or 32nd in a row con in San Diego.
Crazy, yeah.
Fun. I'll have a lot more original art for sale there this year. The artists I represent, like Ted Richards and Dan O'Neill, Frank Stack, for original art, but we'll have tons of mainstream Charlton art. My buddy Patrick Sullivan will be there with me. 1615 is my booth. It's a corner. I've been there forever. I moved there with Carnal Comics when we teamed up. You know, right across from Last Gas, right there on the aisle, in the same block of Fantagraphics, right near Bud Plant and Mile High. Great place to be.
It's awesome.
So it takes a lot of work throughout the year to coordinate that big show. And then VA Comic Con Halloween weekend, I guess 29th and 30th. I do that every year in Richmond, Virginia. My buddy Brett Carreras runs that. He's also my partner. My art from Edict cards, recipe cards.
That's right. Yeah. Put together by his
you know, the articles he would one of the articles he would skipped over in my guide was the 2-page tribute to Dana Crum.
Yes.
So I was saying, I mean, I'm real close with her, a good friend, so I write about that, and the mutual cartoonist friends write about that too in there. So I mean, there's something for everyone. I mean, there's, you know, some of the articles might be blatant self-promotion, but you know, it's a small world. You know, everyone needs to pimp something, you know.
Yeah.
Or share their little niche of the world. So, you know, the back issues of my guide and Kennedy's guide, the articles are great reading in and of themselves, even if the guides, the prices are out of date. You know, as historical collectibles, they're worth having.
Yeah.
You know. So definitely there's, you know, track it, find it for the right price. But yeah, it's always fun going to a convention or a store and finding a few goodies hidden there. But like I said, a lot of the old timers are gone, and a lot of the new mall type stores just don't want to have actions, you know. So
yeah,
it is, you know, we're just trying to raise the profile here. You know, there's no agenda other than, you know, love of comics. But if someone wants to bribe me and make it a corrupt conspiracy, I'm down with it. Just PayPal.
Yeah. I'll make sure I leave links right to your PayPal.
There you go.
Okay, well, I think maybe we'll wrap it up there. There's been some activity in the comments, but nothing major. We have a whole whopping 8 people watching us. That's kind of
thank you very much for that. That's cool.
Yeah, thanks very much for watching, everybody.
The top of my head cut off. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for getting in touch and coming on to the channel here to talk about it.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate your interest and your enthusiasm, and everyone watching, reach out to me. Some of them already have, on Facebook and Twitter, but I'm out there. I'm always available. And phone calls, very hands-on, user support of the guide, always have been. So,
and hunt down
so thank you.
Buy them. For everybody,
absolutely,
go and hunt them down and buy them. Like, don't be shy. Try them out.
Cool.
Right on. Stick around one sec while I end the broadcast here. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. It was nice. Thanks for joining, and feel free to get in touch if you're watching this after the live broadcast. Just get in touch with me. Get in touch with Dan. Don't be shy. Maybe you too can tear apart a book and have somebody contact you to correct you. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. We'll see you soon.